Contrary to popular belief, I am not on a landline or a dial-up internet. But as I was saying, we're glad you're here. I'm going to introduce Debbie and Maureen in a second, but I wanted to kick us off with just a quick Toni Morrison quote. Toni Morrison left us in summer of 2019, but if you read any of her work, you know how powerful it was. But even more, and most people don't know this, she was a beloved teacher. And this is a quote from Toni Morrison about her students and work. Toni says, "I tell my students, when you get these jobs that you've been so brilliantly trained for, just remember that your real job is that if you are free, you need to free somebody else. If you have some power, then your job is to empower somebody else." And when I think of Debbie and Maureen's work, I think about that quote quite a bit, and I'm excited to have them here today. You've seen their descriptions in the webinar in terms of their jobs and what they do, but let me just say real quick, I don't know of another duo or a provider agency across the country that takes doing customized employment well so seriously. Debbie and Maureen really take time to be purposeful. They've been involved in the fidelity work related to discovery and customized employment. They are a fixture at the annual Best Goes West rendezvous hosted by Griffin Hamas, which is invitation only, which means you can't just show up. And Debbie and Maureen are always there because they're so valued. It's my great pleasure to introduce them to you today. And I hope you take notes and again, spend some time learning from these two wonderful women. Welcome, Debbie and Maureen. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So technically, should we turn off our cameras? Would that make the internet better, or do you want us to keep them on?
I think that's probably a good idea. Won't you go ahead?
Okay.
And everybody, you are welcome to do that. Normally we're pestering you, but you're welcome to do it as long as you promise me you're going to be purposeful and intentional and listen really well. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. So I am going to kick off the first half of this webinar, and then Maureen's going to pick it up from there. Maureen and I both, you'll probably notice, are quite intentional in our actions. We're also both pretty energetic, and we like to have a lot of fun. So we're going to intersperse some silliness within our wisdom, hopefully, or hopefully some wisdom within our silliness as well. And feel free to ask questions as we go. Both of us would really prefer that this be a dialogue rather than a monologue. And we really want to make sure that you get out of it something that you can walk away with today. So this is Quality Improvement with Purpose, and it is presented by myself, Debbie Ball, and Maureen Carasiti, both of Easterseals, Southern California. Next slide, please. So when you think about growth and learning, intentional learning and creating a culture of learning are just so paramount to everything that we do. We really want people to feel that they have arrived at a place, at a company, an agency where they can create a future for themselves and others. And like Doug was speaking about with the quote earlier, we have something that we can share. Let's share it with others so that they can share it then with others. So a learning organization is a business that prioritizes learning, growth, and innovation in every facet of its culture. These companies encourage their employees to learn, develop skills, and take unconventional work approaches. They provide environments where people feel comfortable asking questions and presenting unique ideas and diverse perspectives. Those are not all easy things to do, especially when you consider the diversity of our workforces, right? One of the things that Maureen and I are very intentional about doing when we come together with a big group of people, and if we're fortunate enough to have the time for a retreat or for a really intense session, one of the first things we say is like, this is a safe zone. I mean, we can laugh at each other in here, but there's nothing that you can say that should be embarrassing or should walk out of this room, because we really want it to be dynamic and creative, and we want people to feel energized and be throwing out those unconventional ideas, because that's where the wisdom really comes from. That's where the beauty really comes from. And when one person sees somebody else learn it, it just reinforces for them that it is okay to do that. and then another person does, and another person does. So it really is, and I love this graphic to the left because it really is about, very carefully tending to a seedling and watching it grow and helping it grow. And then there's one more quote here, which I fell in love with. I was putting this deck together and was thinking, how if there were one thing that you could say about an intentional learning environment, or just the concept or the philosophies behind it, is really the success of the whole is impacted by the success of one, right? But then you can also flip that on its back, because the success of one is also impacted by the success of the whole, right? But if we're really going to make a successful organization, we need that one single employee to be successful, and we need them to feel engaged and bring them along. Next slide. So what does it all look like? These are some of the things that we're going to be talking about. Adult learning styles. Adult learning styles are much different than children learning styles, and the amount of attention span that we have as we get older is much different than when we're younger. The culture of learning, right? Tangible and intangible. How can we mix all of these things in so that a culture of learning is really something that's vibrant and continues to grow and is rewarded and celebrated, right? We're going to talk about the planning process, understanding the roots, SMART goals, teams training others, inspiring each other, reinforcing. One of the things I'm going to spend just a second on right here, right now, is the understanding the root. And I think too often in our society, what we do is we say, this is your goal, go do it. But we don't explain to people why that goal is of value to the organization or to their own, performance. If we tell one of our staff that they need to go get 6 jobs, okay, that's a pretty big goal, but we don't think about breaking it down so that they understand why those 6 are so important, or how they're going to get to those 6. So like a lot of people, we put things off until it's the last minute, and then, oh my God, we still need 6 jobs. But we realized, Maureen and I realized several years ago when we were doing performance evaluations, that, it's really, the jobs are actually, it's not even the jobs for us that we count as successes, it's the retention. But, the jobs are a checkpoint along that line. And then of course, certainly quality of life. But in order to get the jobs, we also need referrals. And to get the referrals, we need the relationships with the funding agencies and the history and the successes within the community, so that people understand that we're a valuable organization. But when you start putting each one of those checkpoints in place, your staff really start understanding more of why those different things are of value. And it's not just that we're asking them to do more administrative tasks or to do more work or to things that aren't matter, but really it's in valuing them, entrusting them with kind of the entire planning process of the organization, and letting them see inside why these things are important. And we get a better buy-in, and staff all of a sudden are going, I got it, now that makes sense. And we didn't even realize that until we started doing it, but it was a major aha moment for our staff. So we always want to make sure when we're setting a goal or a BHAG, or starting our planning process or whatever, that we not only talk about our big overarching goal of improving lives for people with disabilities, but we're also talking about how we're going to get there, why it's important to get there, all of the steps that go into it, and what each individual team member's role is, because you cannot do it alone. So just some of the super important things that we've learned. And keep it fun. One of the things that we learned also, and this was just absolutely profound if you think about it, and then again, it's so silly, is people get really excited when they get a new job, and they're excited because they're excited about the new work that they're going to be doing, right? So they're thinking, oh my goodness, I got to go work with this person, and we're going to go do these things, and we're going to make this happen. We're going to make all these neat connections, and they're already thinking about how much fun they're going to have, and their minds racing about different ways that they can do discovery or customized employment. And then what do? We hire them, and we get them in and sit them at a desk and make them read a bunch of stuff for the first 3 weeks or attend seminars, and there's no more energy, right? All of that spark is just dwindling away day by day by day. So again, we flipped the way that we do our orientation, and all new staff are out in the field, if not day 1, by day 2, and they're meeting clients. they're not working with clients on day 2. They're shadowing, or they may be doing some mentoring or meeting up with someone for lunch. But we very intensely realized that we need to keep that spark going. We need to keep that excitement and that energy going. And you can't do it if you're just reading things. Now, I am by no means am I saying that the orientation materials and the administrative onboarding and the historical information that we provide on disability services is not important. I think that they're massively important. But I think that we really need to balance that with ensuring that people know those pieces, but understand that this is Tom and this is who you're going to be working with. And Tom is here because other service providers haven't been successful in helping him get a job and change the way that employment looks for him. So just something to keep in mind. It is very intentional, and it is something that we add to everything that we do. Next slide. Excuse me. So when we're talking about training people too, this is super important. I know this is a very, very busy slide, and it's not even really meant to be understandable. There's just so much garbage on it. So on the left-hand side, you'll see an HPDI circle. It's the Herman Brain Dominance Institute. And they say that the brain is essentially broken up into 4 quadrants. And there are 4 different types of people, if you will. Those who are problem solvers, those are who are conceptual, those are talkers or emotional, and planners. Okay, so everybody in the world falls somewhere on that spectrum. And if you can see the photo that's there, it's pointing kind of toward the A with the B. There's a black diamond in the middle, and it shows that the largest part of this person that's sampled on this HBDI circle is a problem solver, followed by a planner. And then they're not very emotional, and they're not very good at conceptualizing. So this is going to be your person that's behind the screen. So they definitely have a place in the agency, and can definitely contribute some great things. But this is how they see the world. If there's a problem, let's figure it out. Let's plan it. Let's get rid of it and move on to the next thing. Okay. And then you've got to think about everybody and everything that they bring to the table, right? What about learning styles, ethnicity, experiences, race, culture, nationality, religion, language, physical abilities, sexual orientation? We could go, gender, education level. We could go on and on and on. Everybody experiences things differently, and everybody brings something else to the table. So in order to be successful as trainers, as supervisors, and really create that, cultivate that learning opportunity, we need to be responsive to everything that's on that puzzle in the middle. And then you add to that the generations, right? And how each generation's experience has changed their lives. So when you're thinking about putting together a training package, you can't just do it one-dimensionally. You really need to be thinking about, how am I going to make sure this person understands what I'm saying? How am I going to make sure this is included in this? If someone's processing this way, how do I respond if they have a question, right? It can't all be didactic. It can't all be just, here's your piece of paper, you need to read the paper. So it really needs to be a mix of different experiential things, different ways that information is shared. Next slide, please. Maureen?
I clicked it. Can you hear me?
There you go.
Wait, backslide.
Thank you.
Okay.
So here's another thing, the importance again of really creating that culture of learning and learning and thriving. Okay, you want to attract better candidates. You want to retain your most talented people. You want to increase engagement and productivity, deliver the best possible customer service, enhance diversity, inclusion, and equity, and improve employee well-being and safety. So all of these things really come through when you've got an invested associate that is really, thriving because they're in the right spot, and you're hitting their learning objectives. And if you think about it for customized employment, especially, the core competencies of a customized employment specialist. You've got the curiosity, you've got the lifelong learning, you've got those the need to work with others and to create puzzles, or not to create puzzles but to solve puzzles, and all of those pieces really align with creating that learning organization and supporting people to be all their best. Next slide, please. I thought we skipped a slide. I'm sorry. So if you would click again, here's my lovely goldfish. This seems kind of funny to put a goldfish in here. And typically, if I have a goldfish in my PowerPoint, it would be the little one with the shark fin on his back, because he knew he was going to be somebody someday. But this goldfish tells a really unique story. And did you realize that the average human attention span is 8.25 seconds? Did anybody know that? I mean, we all know that we process things pretty fast, and if an email doesn't catch your attention, you're already gone to the next thing. But average human attention span is 8.25 seconds. And I want to share with you, Maureen, next slide, or transition, please. That this little goldfish has an attention span of 9 seconds. Okay, so never underestimate others. All right, that goldfish has a greater attention span than most adults do. Okay, and next link. And the average, the average internet video watch time is 2.7 minutes. So if you think about that, and you think about our lives, and you think about some of the meetings that we do, and the presentations or the lectures, or the up in front of an audience, but how much of that is being lost? A lot of it. I'm sure a lot of it. Next slide, please. So that's another piece that we want to talk on too here is, I got my slides mixed up. I'm sorry. I thought the next one was there. Okay, so adult learning theory is really critical when you're thinking about all of the ways that people learn, because as kids, we're sat in front of a board and we're told that we're going to be doing this for the next 12 years, and that's the expectation. So I always say we're learning to test, or we're learning to learn in school, but that's it. It's not really a retention thing. It's just you need to be able to vomit it back up. But as adults, we cipher everything that we're learning. So we need to be in the place to be ready to learn. So the first thing we always do is, we always start off with a kind of a get the road dust off, whether it's some kind of icebreaker or something. But just get your head in the game, get away from everything you just left, forget about that phone call you just hung up from, and let's really shake it off and get ready to learn, right? And then the orientation of learning too, like I talked about, it's so much different than when you're a child. You can't just hand out a packet and say, take it home and come back tomorrow and write a report on it. That's not how we learn. Some people do, and I've got staff who actually ask me if they can do that so that they can understand it. And that's perfectly fine with me. That's the way that they process things. But that's more comfortable for them. And that's something that we need to do as adult learners too, is make sure that we're hitting those different communication styles so that people have the opportunities to process things in the way that they do. You need to be motivated to learn. Our staff need to be motivated. If they're walking in that office space or whatever, coming and going, oh, good Lord, here we go. We're going to sit through another day like this. By the time I get home, it'll be 6:30 at night, and I'll already have missed dinner, and the kids will probably be, and they're already thinking about that. They're not going to be too motivated. So we want to make sure that staff are coming in, again, ready to learn, highly motivated. We've got these great topics. These are the things that we're bringing in. We did this just for you. Here are some of the things we're going to be doing. Walk them through the day so that they understand, right? Make sure that they're part of the conversation. They can help build the agenda. There's nothing more empowering than having adult learners help build the agenda and the training topics. So we do that all the time. And they need the reason to learn, right? The reason to learn is so that we can always get better, so that we can always share more success stories, so that we can increase our footprint, so that more people are going to work, more people are getting quality housing, more people are living quality, sustainable lives, right? All of those things. And then people also, again, sort everything that they learn through their self-concepts and their experiences. So I may say, earthworms are always 2.5 inches long. And we may have an adult learner in the room thinking, no, I've seen adult earthworms that are about 4 inches long. So all of a sudden things have stopped and they're processing their things. So now they're wondering what my experience is that's led me to believe that, right? And so we've just kind of lost people. So anytime that we can be more inclusive and less specific like that, so that people aren't kind of challenging their experiences against ours, and whether that be a lived experience like who lives next door to you, what culture you came up in, again, sexual orientation, gender, role model, anything like that. All of those comparisons are happening because that's just how we process things as adults. So ways to help with that. Next slide, please. And after this slide, I'm going to turn it over to Maureen. So this is the learning pyramid, and this is just absolutely fascinating. And I wish more and more and more people would really adopt this. If you think about learning, you don't learn much when you just sit in the classroom. At least I don't. I mean, I learn how to make curly cues on my little parts and stuff because I'm a huge fidgeter and I can't sit still at all. So we need to make sure that people are interacting and then they're doing things collectively. And we don't want to just be passive. We don't want to just have people sitting there and listening to us. Here's a piece of paper to read. Here, this is what I'm going to tell you about today. Here's a video to reinforce this. Right? Watch how I do this. Okay, great. Now thanks. Go forth and conquer. That's not a very exciting day, is it? Okay, so we want to break it out. We want to do some of everything. We want to do discussion groups. We want to practice by doing. We want to teach others. We want to have our staff teach others, right? Mm-hmm. We want our staff who are learning things and who are gaining their self-confidence and who are doing things well to be some of the leaders that are leading the next generation, right? All of those things are super empowering, and all of those things blend into really successful learning. And I tell you, if you have never tried to teach somebody how to do a skill, you will never learn to do that skill. I mean, the greatest way to learn is to teach somebody to do a specific skill. Because when you're the passive person and you're just taking it in, you're reading it one way totally. And it's like, okay, fine, whatever, we're almost done here. But then when you have to start training that skill, especially if it's a really discrete skill, it becomes totally different. And all of the things that you were assuming in your head are gone out the window. So what we like to do is we like to say, this is why we're here. This is some of the stuff that we're going to be doing today. We're going to have you do this. We're going to have you come back and do this. We're going to have you report out, right? We're going to break up into groups. We're going to break up into mixed up groups, small groups, so that you're not always in the same group. You're going to leave the office. You're going to come back to the office. You're going to tell us how you did something. You're going to do some research, right? So all of these pieces are hitting all of those different pieces of learning of communication styles that we talked about before. So I hope that was helpful. And now I'm going to turn it over to Maureen, who's going to discuss more about intentionality.
All right. I particularly like the teaching others. I had a guitar teacher one time that said that I needed to teach the song that I was learning to someone else. And by doing that, I became more proficient in the particular song. So that's always stuck with me. That was something that I learned as a kid. I'm going to talk about intentionality. So what is exactly intentionality? What does that mean? It is a mental state, right? Like it's a place, right? It's of being directed toward a particular object or a state of others. We kind of adopted the word intentionality for our word for the year. This has been present in all of our trainings. And I think Debbie actually came up with the word at one of our early sessions in the year. And what exactly does that mean? And to us, it's an ongoing active process. It's constant. It's not this thing that we're going to do one time and be done with it. It's not a one-time or an annual performance review item. This is the intention to do constant cultivation with the people that we work with. And it's an integral part of our continual feedback and of our personal team growth and competency and capability. So as we have been using this word, I spent a weekend really thinking about intention and intentionality. And it's really critical that the intention is linked to action. that if you are going to set intentions, it's not just good enough to set intentions. I mean, you can approach a project and say, oh, I intended to do that, I intended to finish that, I intended to, and so your outcomes aren't that great. So your intention always has to be linked to action. And again, this cultivating in the plant, I think it's very symbolic of ultimately what we want to do with our staff. We do want to nurture, we do want to give them water, so to speak, to grow and to become strong and to produce fruit, right? And to produce a harvest. So yes, intentionality is critical, and that's just something that we have been. And it's not a new thing for us. I think we just kind of coined the word this year, and have decided to use it in all of our meetings and such. Intention in organizations oftentimes is a dynamic that's deprioritized, especially in times of lulls or budget distress. I often hear of other organizations that will like, oh, we're not getting the referrals. So we're going to give our staff some time off, or we're going to have them do some administrative type of stuff, which, that might be great. But the fact is, downtimes are the most verdant for learning. So when you do have times of lulls and times where, there is more time, so to speak, be intentional about starting some training, doing some more a deeper dive into the subjects that you want people to learn about. And it's also really cool because you have the opportunity when things aren't so busy for people to really focus on the learning, right? Oftentimes if you're trying to fit in a training here, and that's on top of everything else that's going on, sometimes it's hard for people to really come and to be present. So just taking advantage of those downtimes is really, really, really critical. The culture of learning organizations, we believe, and there's a lot of work that's been done around this, and a lot of research. Lifelong learning is at its core. The best learning organizations believe that lifelong learning is part of their mission. And when you're working with people, and in our organization, we're serving individuals. If we don't commit to lifelong learning, we're probably not providing the best service, because things can always be better. We can always be better. Learning becomes the grease and interactions between managers and contributors. It's our fuel. Learning is the fuel innovation engine. As every associate is continually growing in capability, they are engaged in their work, and they are providing that expertise to the good of the team, the department, the customer, supplier, and ultimately the organization. This can be represented in so many different ways. And as we were putting together our training slides for this session, we thought it would be cool to share one of what this could look like. And so we had a meeting a couple of months ago. Doug was actually out for it, Doug Crandell. And we had our teams do some systematic instruction training. And I'm just going to give you a snippet of what that looked like. So we paired people up in teams, and
so that I would know how to take the trucks off to either replace them. But we'll just show how to
So this is an example of people learning its systematic instruction and then sharing it with the other team.
So, and as you can see, this doesn't actually show the entire room. We have a lot of people that are sitting on the other side of the table. But when you think about learning and the intention of learning, you're using, in this example, staff are using all of their senses, right? Like they're focusing in, but then we're also giving them the opportunity for the hands-on approach. This actually was a silent event. They were teaching each other through the use of hand gestures and such, not through any type of words. But this is just an example of what our trainings look like. Again, there's a very strong agenda that is set with intention, and ultimately getting what we want people to learn out of the session. We don't just do training for the sake of doing training. A lot of times we are asking staff what they need and observing what staff need to learn more of, and then creating the agendas for those trainings based on what the staff need, and where we think they need to go in their skills to further augment their talents in the work. Debbie, do you want to say anything about that slide?
Just that it's a perfect example of, we had the discussion in the morning. We talked about being intentional. We talked about errorless learning, and we paired people up in small groups. And then those small groups had to determine what they were going to teach others in the room. And then they had to teach each other how to do the task. And then they had to do a task analysis, and then again, demonstrate to the others in the room. So you're really challenging all of those different learning modalities when you're trying to do something like that. And that's why it's so critical. And people didn't realize how tense it got, for them personally, because of course, we all want to be perfect. And when we're writing out steps and we're thinking about, okay, next I would just pick up the thing, and it's like, wait a minute, just put it down, And so you're really thinking about all of those individual steps, and does it make sense to put this here, or does it twist here? And, do I really need to prompt someone? I know one of the guys, people are so prompt dependent, and we're so used to prompting people that we get ready to tell people no before they've even made a move. And, of course, with systematic instruction, you don't want to do that. The last thing you want to do, you want to set it up so that we're not saying no, and so that it is smooth, errorless learning. So all of those really come into play with this, and it's a really fascinating. It's an excellent learning mode, which obviously captures most of those things, but also the communication and the learning styles, and just the reinforcement of the skills themselves.
Yeah, definitely. And Debbie mentioned this earlier about creating the safe space, and I want to revisit that just for a second, because that's really important, especially when you're a member of a team, right? And we all want to do our best. We all want to look our best. We all want to perform at our highest level. By a space that is safe for people, you're allowing people to be vulnerable. And I think in learning, that's critical, because if you're sitting back and you have a question about something and you're afraid to ask, more than likely there's other people in that session that have the same question that might be afraid to ask. So everyone's going to learn by questions. Everyone's going to learn by failure. Looking at things that didn't go well in a situation and learning from that. And in a strong learning organization, it's important that people feel they feel safe to be able to ask questions and to not always have the perfect answer for things without fear of like losing their job or, so we really do strive to make sure that people are comfortable and people are feeling safe in the learning environment. Okay. Debbie, you wanted to do this slide.
You want to go back and forth, or you just want me to knock it out?
I'll do a couple of them. I would like to do the I love our meetings one.
Oh man, that's one of my stuff.
Okay, I'll add on to that one. How about that?
So again, we really want to keep things fun and exciting, and we do. We try to make people laugh, even at the silly stuff. We try to, throw out chocolate candy and win prizes and those kind of things. No, we don't try to do that. I don't know when I started saying try again. There
Yeah.
just is no such thing as try. It's a great quote this weekend, actually, and I copied it. The difference between try and triumph is oomph, right? Either, I mean,
I love that.
I know. And if you break it down, it's so true. It's like you put the oomph behind it and it happens. If you don't, it doesn't happen. So anyway, so we do keep it fun, and we try to order. No, there's that try again, Jake. We order different foods so people aren't coming in and having the same old rubber chicken every time. And people are really appreciative. And they talk about other places where they came in and they had to sit here, and there was assigned seating, or they didn't get breaks during the day, or they had no idea how long the day was going to go on, or even what the topics were. And so, we want people to know that the grass isn't always greener somewhere else, that the grass is pretty darn green here. And we have a lot of intangible things that we can give, as well as the tangible. But, at the end of the day, we're nonprofit. So there's only so much I can do when it comes to great, we got some questions coming in. So when it comes to the end of the day, there's only so much we can do financially, but I can make it interesting. And I think that, hitting on the lifelong learning aspect, and hitting on the being part of the larger community, and the social issues and the social justice pieces, and how we can speak for others who aren't heard, and how we can really stand up and, make a difference for that mom who's been advocating for their son or daughter for the last 40 years and still can't get a job.
Mhm.
So really, truly, I think that's the crux of it. Celebrating our wins, making sure that everyone is celebrated. And one of my staff just recently at a meeting, at one of our meetings, it was the end of the day even, and she said, "Oh, I just got back from spending time with my family, and they were talking about, oh my God, I have a meeting today. I hate our meetings." It's like, you do? I love our meetings. I'm so excited when I have meetings.
Yeah. Well, and Debbie, I wanted to just share too. It was a 3-day weekend. I think it was the 3-day weekend back in February, and we had a meeting scheduled after our 3-day weekend now, coming back on that Tuesday.
And it was an intense one.
It was. We had a strong agenda. People knew about it ahead of time. It was gonna, it was gonna be an all day. People were traveling in for the session. And when I arrived a little bit early to help with some setup of things. And as people were coming in, there were just the greatest smiles on everyone. And I was like, how was your 3-day weekend? And people were like, I am so excited about today. I am so excited about this, this session. And it was just really, I don't know, that meant the world to me because, after a 3-day weekend, you think, oh, here it is, Tuesday, I gotta, go to work and everything. But people were actually really looking forward to coming to the meeting. And I think that was very, very telling. Another thing that I'm going to just kind of piggyback on Debbie here is celebrating each other. And I think that we don't really do that enough. Because, and there's, work and things that kind of get in the way of that. But I think setting the intention of celebrating each other and make sure that you're taking the time to do that and sharing the stories, sharing the wins. How did you get to that? How did you achieve that outcome? How did you get that particular job? I think there's a lot of rich learning that occurs through the journey of that celebration. And so I would just encourage everyone to, really take the time, and it's energizing to staff. Like the slide said, it keeps the fire burning. Staff get super excited to celebrate with each other, and then they feel good, when they are recognized for the work that they are doing. So enough can't be said about that.
And just one more, if I could piggyback off of that before we get to the
Mhm.
questions, is, our staff are all field staff, so they do not come to an office. They don't have offices. So they're really out there being the one man soldier and the one man, pulling things together. So when they get together as a group, it is really powerful. So, okay. And I'm sorry, did you have more, or shall we turn it over to Doug for questions?
I think we're ready for Doug for questions,
Or Joseph, whichever.
or Joseph.
You guys, I've just been putting stuff in chat, and our friends who are on, please put in chat or unmute and ask questions. Debbie and Maureen, one of the things I put in chat was this is a master class on leadership and supervision. And so I think this slide answers this last one, but I want to start with this question if you want to add anything else. And the question is, what tools or approaches or techniques do you all use to recover from setbacks? I don't know if a setback can mean I almost had somebody a job and it didn't work out, or I had a bad experience maybe, with another professional that are in human services. So is there anything you want to add to that? I mean, you've covered some of it here, but specifically, how do you all and your team recover from those setbacks?
Yeah, that's critical. We really do encourage people to talk about it, and we really do. Much like the discussion about keeping it safe, right? If somebody's having a bad day, if somebody just got barked at by an owner who was, pissy and didn't want to have anything to do with us, or you thought that you almost had this guy a job, and then all of a sudden the owner turns around and is like, well, I don't have time for this. And we've all run into those kind of things, and it's just like, it's demoralizing. So our staff know that they can call us anytime, and they can really have those behind the door conversations and just vent and spew and get it out there, because we need them to get that out of their system. And we need them to understand that, it's not the first, it won't be the last. We're not trying to fix anything. We just want them to be able to get that negativity out, because it is just poison. And then once they get it out, they can kind of shake it off and start over again, because that is really what we need. Is we need them to go back in with their, smile on again and say, how's your day going today? Hope it's better than yesterday. And, and we do debrief as a team too. There are those opportunities. Not everyone is comfortable doing that, so not everyone does. But some people like to debrief in the team scenario, and we just toss it out there.
Definitely. And then, looking at the lesson, looking at what went right, what didn't go so well, and being real with that. And I think that's where we have such a good strength, both Debbie and I, in that if someone comes to us and we are processing out something, we're okay with, that wasn't the best choice there, but what can we do going forward? What would you do differently? And putting it on the staff sometimes to recognize what they need to do differently. Is really critical. Debbie and I might see it and we might know the answer right away, but it's much different when a staff member can identify, wow, I really messed up on that, or I really loved how I handled this, and that was such an awesome outcome that I got because I did this.
So well said, Debbie and Maureen. This next question is connected to that, right? And I know some of these answers. That's no fun if I answer them, but it feeds into that. Like, so keep in mind, audience, what the other question was about how do you recover. This question feeds into it nicely, and you touched on it a little, but I want to give you another opportunity as well. What type of personality traits make for an excellent SECE staff member? In other words, are you looking for specific personality traits as you're recruiting and hiring and interviewing?
Hell yeah. a few years ago, well, it's actually more than a few years ago, right, Debbie, that we rewrote the whole job, what we were looking for in terms of characteristics of staff. And what we realized is someone might have the greatest pedigree, on a resume, but it's really the most successful attributes are things like curiosity, creativity, the person that can go and light up the room, the person that's comfortable talking to anyone, that can strike up a conversation with someone, the person that believes anything is possible, that sees opportunity where other people don't see where they don't see opportunity, they see it. So we really started hiring for those, and all of our interview questions are based on trying to vet out those characteristics in people. And sure, we would love to share what we call our magic email.
And I would just say, since I got to observe that from afar, it was inspiring, I think, to a lot of people, and certainly goes to your intentionality and purpose piece here. And Debbie, for the rest of you, you're not looking at the chat, says the person is a we person, not an I. I love that. Mm-hmm. But I guess what the question is getting at, right, is that if you start off with hiring somebody, as you said, Maureen, who's not creative, inquisitive, you're going to have a hard time picking up any of these skills and really making a difference and really freeing somebody, like Toni Morrison says in that quote. Debbie, you want to add anything else to that? Shall I move on to the next question?
I do want to add something else to that. I'm going to see if I can. No, I'm not. I'm going to take over the screen.
So I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you. So this is, I wanted to share this with you. This is our KSAs on our job description. You ask and you shall receive. So knowledge, skills, and abilities must be able to multitask, accept challenges. Of course, we know that. But skilled in observation, negotiation, and advanced planning, ability to collect, interpret, and use information swiftly, knowledge of and willingness to research local businesses, identify needs, demonstrated ability at project management. I don't think enough people understand that what we do is project management, right? From A to Z, it's always be closing, but every single step in there is a piece in the project management plan. I consistently demonstrate good judgment and decision-making skills, customer service orientation, strong, effective communication skills. But there was one other that I wanted to share with you too, and that was just recently we redid our ads. And here is a little bit along those lines. Doug, you can queue up the next question if you want while I'm pulling this up. Did I lose you, Doug?
No, I've just been talking away. All right. Well, I better condense this quickly then. Okay. So the question, I think, comes from a job developer or someone who's engaging employers, and it has to do with the Easterseals brand. And the question is, does the Easterseals brand, help you get your foot in the door at businesses?
So, I love that question.
That's a great question.
Yeah. So let me start by saying no, it's about the individual.
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Debbie. I'm working with Doug, and we noticed that you probably had an opportunity where Doug could help you out with some stuff around here. We'd like to talk about that.
So Deb, you're really, what you're saying, and Maureen, chime in here, and I certainly know this too, is that you are supporting staff and focusing on the person.
Absolutely.
And really trying to focus on the employer, because even with the branding of Easterseals, most small businesses could care less where we work. They just want us to help. And I guess that feeds into something I wanted to say really, really quickly. When I was on site with these guys, many of you on the call have done informational interviews. These guys are so serious about engaging businesses that they had teams do the informational interviews twice, one in the afternoon and one in the morning. And then they had the staff that had already been taught quite a bit of this go out and do some stuff and bring those in business engagement stories back. So they're really serious about that. And I think that is so evident.
Mm-hmm. I think too, using the name of the organization is it's a conflict for me internally, ethically, kind of, just as, are we there because we work for Easterseals, or are we there because we believe that the person that we're working with has some skills and assets and magic that, your business needs? And so it shifts the whole dynamic by not sharing that you're from Easterseals.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
oh, we need a job because we're from Easterseals and these poor people we work with. No, we're
Yeah.
going into businesses with, you have a business need and this guy has talent. And, we think that this person can make a difference to your business, which is why people hire, right?
That's right. That's right. When I was on site with these guys, one of the teams, I think I've shared this with a few of you, did an informational interview with a 3D printer that would create a specific patient's heart from a scan so that the surgeon could practice on it before the surgery. I mean, so there's where that curiosity really comes into play. Well, we're down to it here, guys. I know Joseph wants us to do the survey. Are there any other questions for Debbie and Maureen? I think there have been a few folks asking if they can have the PowerPoint. We'll certainly have this in the archive when Joseph sends it out. And of course, we have lots of folks hit the website for this. Any other questions? Christine Gudgeon just said she thought it was wonderful information, very useful for folks here in Georgia, but she had to jump off just a minute or so ago. Well, I want to thank Debbie and Maureen for giving us your time. It was short notice and you all have done a great job on the day after a long weekend. Thank you, my friends. There is the survey. And as always, if we can help, please reach out. And we're grateful for everyone who attended. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.